And then ask the next person, you get to tag the next person to introduce themselves. So my name is Claire Strawn. I live on Horn Lane, and I'm co-chair of this organization. And I'm going to tag Joshua.
I'm Joshua Keelis. I live over by Fairway on for like the last, I don't know, 4 or so years. I'm on the board.
Tag.
Oh, and Charles C.
Hi, I'm Charles C. Cartwright. I live on Norman Avenue. And I've been coming to these meetings for over a year. That's about it.
Just a reminder, we do keep attendance. So if you'll log your name into the chat for the attendance, the purpose of the attendance is when we have a vote, you need to have attended a meeting at least once prior to vote.
There's a lot of swagger in the showstopper.
And if you're not talking, you should mute. Thank you.
Anna's probably so angry because he got a handshake and he's not.
Okay, somebody's watching the British baking show. Who's next? Elkin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Can you hear me now? So I'm Laura Elkin and I live off of Evergreen.
Laura Elkin, okay. And who's next?
Alex.
I'm Alex Elkin and I also live off Evergreen.
Ah, okay. You want to call on someone else?
I will call on John.
Thank you, sir. I'm John Belcher. I'm on the board and co-chair of River Road Community Organization. I live off of Arbor, and I will pick on Julie.
I feel like I've been on the British baking show lately with all the holiday baking. I'm Julie Hume and I live on River Road right next to Maury Jacobs Park. And Jan Spencer next.
Thanks, Julie. I'm Jan Spencer. I'm on the board and I live on Benjamin, which is 1 block north of Horn Lane and parallel to Horn Lane. I've lived here for 20 years. And I will call on Dan.
I'm Dan Staso, and it's been a while since I've attended one of these board meetings, but I am on Sunny Drive near Horn.
It was for housing, so that's good.
Okay. You want to call on someone next?
Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie Worcester, and Andrew Worcester is floating around on here as a face also. We live over off of Hilliard Road near River Road Elementary, and we've been there about 6 years now. I am on the board, and I'm also on the emergency preparedness team. I will call on Maya.
Hi, this is Maya. I live on River Road across from Hanson. Been here since about 2007. Who hasn't spoken? Hi, Brenda.
I'm Brenda. I live currently over off of Green Acres Road, but I have property and will be part of Riversong Co-housing, which is between Oakley and McClure, and we're in the middle of building. So I used to live in the neighborhood and am a part of the social justice committee. I'll call on Dwight. I don't think we heard from you in this.
Nope. Dwight Owens. I'm on the board as secretary. I'm also chair of the North Eugene Unhoused and Affordable Housing Committee, and recently was appointed to the HRC Homeless Work Group. I will call on Karen.
Hey, I'm Karen Nixon. This is my first meeting here. I'm over on Norman Avenue. I'm trying to figure out who in the world hasn't talked yet. Louisa, have you gone?
Hey neighbors, Louisa D here. I live over on Sunnyside for about 10 years. I'm on the Community Advisory Committee for the Neighborhood Plan and the Eugene Sustainability Commission. As a late joiner, is there anyone else who hasn't gone I can pick on? Ellen Rifkin.
Hi, I'm Ellen. I live on Canoop Lane, and I've been there for about 16 or 17 years. And I'm on the Social Justice Committee. And I'll call on, who just had their hand up? Someone had their hand up, but I.
Hey there, I can just jump in. Harry Sanger, I live on Rosewood Avenue, and I'm on the RRCO board. I've got two special guests tonight.
Me.
What's your name?
Okay. My name's
Okay. And let's move on to Keith Higgins. You're muted. Okay.
Hi, can you hear me? My name is Keith Higgins. I have recently moved 6 months ago to Yapoa Terrace, which is in a different neighborhood. I can say that I spent my childhood, a wonderful childhood, on River Road near Horn Lane and across the street from Arbor Lane, which I know that John Belcher has lived there. It's a wonderful place, and I wanted to stick my nose in here since the downtown neighborhood is not in meeting till after Christmas, but it just helps me to get to know what's going on around me, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Let's move to Pat and Carlene.
Good evening, everyone. I've lived in River Road for 42 years, and I live on Marion Lane, which is very close to the River Road Elementary School.
Pat Riley, I live on Marion Lane with Carlene for the last 35 years. Today's our 35th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Who's next? Zainin.
Hi, I'm Zainin Telshow. I am the treasurer on the board for another week, and then I'm stepping down to pursue some other interests, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. I live just off of Owasso, near the Owasso Bridge, and I've been here since 2013.
Thank you.
I'll call on Ann.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ann Mahoney. I've lived in River Road for 2 years. We live on Sunny Drive. And I've attended a couple of meetings in the past, but I haven't attended for a while. So happy to be here tonight.
Anybody not gone yet? Want to just jump in? Kelly and Lee.
Jump in. This is Kelly and Lee Pembleton. We live on River Road, sort of across from Razor Park, and we've been here about 2.5 years.
Great, welcome. Welcome to all the new faces tonight. That's really exciting to see you here. Did we miss anybody?
Fred hasn't introduced himself.
Okay.
Fred.
Hi, I'm Fred Miller. I've been interested but haven't attended many meetings. I live on Norman near the bike trails.
Great, thanks, Fred. Good. So welcome to all the new faces, and I hope you keep coming back in 2022. And welcome also to the rainy season. So tonight, we have an agenda and an intention of learning more about what all the committees have done over the past year and soliciting your advice or thoughts about what they should be doing in the coming year. We also have a little bit of business to attend to, and we want to have some time to discuss recent vaccination clinic at the school. We anticipate having to go over about 10 minutes. So we would probably get out of this meeting at 8:40. We'll work on it, but it's hard to have to cut people off. So, oh, Becky, you have arrived. Do you want to introduce yourself? No, you're muted.
Oh,
There you
hello?
go. Yeah,
Hi.
they're good.
Sorry, I joined with audio and then muted myself. Hi, I'm Becky Riley. I think a lot of people know me. What am I supposed to say?
That you're famous for creating the garden.
the restoration project at Razor Park. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other, just to mention also that Jolene Simpson will be coming in later because she's at the city council meeting, as is, oh, Ellen, you're here. I thought you were going to be there. Okay, very good. So first item on the, announcements. Announcements should be concise, lasting no more than 2 minutes, and preferably be about an event that's coming up, and it is not a time for personal editorial. So, any announcements? No announcements, John?
Yes, I just want to let you know that the Lane County Commission has redistricted as a result of the 2020 census, and we have a new county commissioner. Let me share my screen with you. So can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, this area right here is the River Road Community Organization. In the past, we've been in District 4, which is Pat Farr's district. At least he's the current county commissioner. They have, this red line was the old district boundary. The yellow and red are the different districts now. So this yellow district is District 1, which was to the north of us, and it's the West Lane district, and it's currently occupied by Jay Bosanich. So Pat is no longer our county commissioner, and Jay will be our county commissioner, although he is up for re-election. So there you have it.
John, is that the stuff in pink?
The current stuff in pink is Pat's current district. Stuff in yellow is Jay's.
So it looks like there's a part of that is still in pink that's in our neighborhood.
This little bit right here, yes.
Yeah.
It's still in Pat Farr's district. A lot of that is also not ours, but in Whitaker.
Okay, thank you. Any other announcements? Can you take your screen share down, John?
Sure, thank you.
I can't see your hand, so if you want to make an announcement, jump in. Okay. I don't see any announcements. John, you have your hand again?
Yeah, would someone from the Social Justice Committee want to let us know why Jolene isn't here, what she's doing at the city council meeting?
Ellen, would you like to share that? Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Ellen.
The Social Justice Committee approached several different neighborhood associations over the past several months to mobilize people in support of police reform, to endorse the ad hoc committee on police policies report, which that committee submitted it to the city council last May. And so Jolene is reading out loud at the city council meeting tonight the statement from these neighborhood associations that we participated in. I hope that's clear.
That's great. Thank you, Ellen.
You're welcome.
She'll join us later. Louisa.
Hi, neighbors. So I participate in the Eugene Sustainability Commission on something called the Urban Canopy Committee. And so we're trying to bring recommendations to City Council around what the City of Eugene can do to support and enhance our urban canopy. And one of the challenges we've engaged with as a community advisory committee for the River Road Santa Clara Neighborhood Plan is the lack of clarity around the, what do you call it, John? The clear and objective standards of the Willamette Greenway. And so what I'd like to do is get some support from the River Road Community Organization to bring a recommendation through the Sustainability Commission to City Council, or particularly to the Planning Commission, to enhance and clarify the clear and objective standards around the Willamette Greenway. And I know that's something that's really important to our community. And so I'd be interested to know if there are neighbors who are willing to draft a letter on behalf of the River Road Community Organization interested in requesting that the Sustainability Commission make that proposal to kind of leverage insight into what we could do to ask the Planning Commission to put that as a priority. So that's something that we're thinking about at the Urban Canopy Committee at the Sustainability Commission, and we would love RRCO support. Thanks.
Louisa, can I suggest you ask folks to put their name, their email, and Willamette Greenway in the chat so you know who they are?
I would very much appreciate that. Thank you.
So there you go, folks. There's your charge. If you'd like to help Louisa do that, and it's important for our neighborhood, put your name in the chat, your email, and just say Willamette Greenway next, so we know that you're in for.
Any other announcements? Okay, so the next item on the agenda is, John, you're gonna take it from here, right? Charlesy.
If I'm unmuted. The next item on our agenda is one that I'm excited to bring to you. We have, as Zanin pointed out to you, he is stepping down from the board, and we have a vacancy on the board to fill. And the process, as defined by our charter, is that the executive board nominates somebody to fill that position, and then the general membership gets to vote to affirm or not affirm that person. And while I'm talking about the charter, Claire alluded to one of the requirements in our charter. For anyone to vote on a motion for the neighborhood, you have to have attended a meeting within the past year and your name be recorded in the chat as having attended. So 2 things there. First of all, put your name in the chat if you want to vote in the future and you haven't been here before. And second of all, as I call for the vote for the individual who I'm about to present, please refrain from voting if you have not attended a meeting in the past year. So I did a quick look at the folks who are here, and I think it's clear we have at least 15 legitimate members here, and therefore we can hold this vote. So having done all that, let me mention or tell you that the person we would like to have you affirm to be on the executive board is Charles C. Cartwright. So Charles, you want to say a quick minute or so about yourself before we vote you up or down?
Yes, thank you, John. As I mentioned before, I've been attending these meetings and the board meetings for a year at least. I have quite a lot of history and being on boards of neighborhood associations, mostly in the Sacramento area where I lived for 40 years. I am a really strong proponent of neighborhood associations. We call ours a community organization here, but they really are an important cohesive part of a neighborhood and help give the neighborhood an identity, help bring people together to collectively work on ways to improve livability for the residents and for the businesses that thrive here. So I started coming to these meetings as soon as I moved into this neighborhood and have been absolutely delighted at the committee structure and would like to be on all the committees. I found that my energy level was a lot more limited than I hoped. And so I concentrate mostly on emergency preparedness along with Jackie Worster. But I have an interest in all aspects of this organization. So I'm happy to serve if that's the will of the membership.
Thank you, Chelsea. Oh, there is one other requirement to vote, and that is you have to live, own property, or have a business in the neighborhood. Sorry, Keith. So with that, I propose to the membership that you affirm Chelsea as our new board member. If you are a legitimate voter, please raise your hand at this time in favor, and then I will ask for those who are opposed. You can also raise your hand using the hand raise possibility.
So you'll do that and I'll.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't see us. Oh, there we are. How long he needs us to keep them up.
I count approximately 25 yeses. Are there any noes? Seeing none. Chelsea, congratulations and condolences. You are now on the board.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Makes me feel really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you pretty much operated as a board member already, so glad to make it official. Okay, so that was our primary piece of business.
You
Now,
can
the
put your
rest-
hands down now.
Oh, yes, thank you, Claire. So the bulk of the rest of the meeting are going to be committee reports to bring you up to date on A, what committees have been doing, B, the issues they are facing right now, and C, the things that they anticipate they will need help with in the year 2022. And one of the purposes of this is to encourage you to volunteer to work with those committees. So as we make our reports, if that's a committee that you think you want to be involved in, let's use the same process as we did with Louisa. Put your name down, your email address, and then whatever committee you want to volunteer with, and we'll get back to you and connect you for that. So does all that make sense? Okay, let's start with the Emergency Preparation Committee. Chelsea or Jackie, do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, thanks, John.
You have 10 minutes.
Okay, cool. So we are the RRCO Emergency Preparedness Team, and we have been meeting monthly for about the last year. We are a handful of neighbors that gather and just talk about what we've been up to as far as emergency preparedness. And some of those things include becoming familiar with the geography of our neighborhood and reaching out to our other neighbors to start the conversation about preparing for emergencies. Some of our big goals are spreading information, talking about emergencies, showing and telling each other what we've been up to, what tips and tricks we're learning along the way. And then we're also trying to identify our local hazards, risks in our area so that we can start identifying preparation plans for that, but also recovery plans if something does ever happen to us. So we're trying to become familiar with the area. Every month we host presentations or conversations about various topics, and some of those have been, we've had eWeb come in to talk to us about their Pledge to Prepare program and what eWeb is doing to prepare for emergencies on a business level. We've had wildfire experts come in to talk about wildfire behavior and risks. And we've also had Central Lane 911 dispatchers come and talk to us about their communications team and why and when we should be contacting 911 and what are some of the realities of contacting 911? What kind of responses might you get from them? We are just starting to talk about radio and communications network. That is still a very early conversation. We're trying to figure out how to use them, who will use them, and when is appropriate to use them. We are also becoming familiar with our local and federal emergency alerts and evacuation levels and evacuation routes. So the city of Eugene and Lane County have released some evacuation levels and areas, zone areas that we're trying to be familiar with and spread that information with our neighbors so that we can all become more familiar. We've built out our initial web page on the RRCO website of preparedness information, and we've included some basic information to get started in your own home. And then we've also started networking with other local neighborhood organizations like Santa Clara and the Bethel neighborhood to the north and the west of us. We all share very similar geographical hazards and risks, and the more people we can include in this conversation, the more neighbors that we can reach with that information and kind of share that workload. There's a lot of topics that can go into emergency preparedness, so we invite everybody to join that conversation. Another big component of what our team has been working on is map your neighborhood or neighbor networking. You guys might have heard the term map your neighborhood in the past, and it is the essence of that program is that in a disaster, your most immediate neighbors are going to be your immediate help that comes to you. In a really large scale emergency responders might not be able to reach you. So the people that live the closest to you might become the people who you need to go to for help. The Map Your Neighborhood program is pretty formal and it has some paperwork involved and there's some steps that you can follow. So we're trying to use that program as a foundation and kind of modify it and adapt it to something that works for us in our current, virtual environment where we interact with people, and make it a little less formal so that it feels a little less overwhelming. We've had a lot of success. Charles E. Cartwright has been the biggest partner here on this team, and she's really been organizing her neighbors there on Norman Avenue to just start the conversation. Charles E., do you want to share a little bit about how that's been going for you?
Thank you, Jackie. It's been a really rewarding process. Of course, we've been in the COVID environment, and there were a lot of concerns about promoting the Map Your Neighborhood program during COVID. What I found with our little neighborhood area is that people were passing one another on the streets, and we would meet and be socially distanced and so on in a cul-de-sac. And slowly it dawned on me that we could really be talking about Map Your Neighborhood issues and sharing information to get prepared. And so it's come about rather well. We are meeting in one of the neighbors' houses once a month. Again, we're really careful to be safe in terms of COVID restrictions, but I think that's helped. And I was pleasantly surprised. My neighbors want to continue meeting once a month, and we're modifying, as Jackie said, the curriculum to center on interests that we have and help one another get prepared on a variety of emergency potentials. So that's about it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Charles.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say the network, so neighbor networking, as we're kind of starting to think of it a little bit more, even if it's not your immediate neighbors that live right next door to you, if you are in contact with people that live in our neighborhood, maybe it's a sewing group, maybe it's a group that meets for coffee, you can bring up emergency preparedness in any of those scenarios, and it can be a very casual mention of it of, hey, do you have a couple of weeks of water stored for you and your family at home? It doesn't necessarily have to be a dedicated meeting to talk about a lot of stuff, which can feel overwhelming to plan and host and go down that route. So we want to try to think about, we want to be open-minded about different methods of talking about these things with each other. So we're trying to be flexible in that mindset going forward. So we're open to all ideas that anybody might have there.
And I would just like to add that if you do are in contact with your neighbors, maybe you've started an effort, but you're not sure if it would be qualify as an emergency preparedness group, we would love to talk with you and know what you're doing. You may have some tips for us and vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. Claire, did you have something?
I might have missed this, but these neighborhoods you're talking about are maybe the 5 or 10 houses immediately proximal to your own. So it's like micro neighborhoods. And that's much more manageable to conceive of.
Really like that term, microwave.
Yeah, even just your own street. It can kind of be just a natural area around your house that makes sense. If there was going to be an emergency and you need to run across the street for help for some reason, or that there's somebody in your immediate vicinity that you might need to check on in an emergency, that's, you can start small, but starting now is always better. So another big activity that we have been working on as well, that's kind of been in the works recently that we're working on for 2022 is a virtual exercise. And some of the Southeast neighbors have successfully done this virtual on Zoom, and they had a wildfire scenario where a fire was coming into the neighborhood, and they played fake radio announcements, and they talked about evacuation levels and when is the time to evacuate. And they just talked as neighbors about what each other would do in that scenario. Would you leave when you got the first evacuation notice, or would you wait? Would you go notify your neighbors? Do you still need to pack all of your stuff? And really the goal of that exercise is to get neighbors familiar with the emergency alerts and the evacuation levels that are available from the city of Eugene and Lane County, and then learn how to to start the conversation, start thinking about what you would do in those scenarios, and becoming familiar with that as a real possibility here in our area. So we are working on our very first exercise planned for early 2022. So there will probably be more details coming out about that early next year, but we are collaborating with the Bethel neighborhood, the Santa Clara neighborhood, and then we're also collaborating with the city of Eugene. The Eugene emergency manager, Carrie Carl, they've been reviewing this information, and we've contacted first responders to find out, we want this to be a realistic scenario, but it will be virtual so that people can participate from the comfort of their own home and really start the conversation here. So all of the details that we've been working on throughout this year, they're working towards getting neighbors more prepared and aware of the risks and hazards that are in our area. So we would love to have everybody join us to share ideas and questions and any thoughts that you have about preparing. Question, Louisa?
I was just curious, being that we're not South Eugene, so we don't have quite the same wildland urban interface challenge that South Eugene has, what would be the emergency that you're hoping to prepare?
Yeah, so that's thank you. I forgot to mention that. This example that we're working on is a chlorine leak at the rail yard. So there's been some sort of an accident and there's chemicals leaking out of the rail yard. People obviously closer to the rail yard are going to be immediately impacted, but there's going to be chemicals that come into the air and spread to the neighboring neighborhoods. So we're going to talk about what would you do in that scenario? Would you leave immediately? There's going to be gridlock traffic involved. So we just want to start that conversation. So yeah, thanks for asking that.
And that is 10 minutes. Jackie and Chelsea, excuse me, Charlesy and everybody else, thank you for that. And if that's a committee that you think you want to get involved with, it's very active. They can always use new names. Go ahead and put your name in the chat, your email, and say emergency preparedness. Okay?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm up next to talk about the neighborhood plan, and I will put a timer on myself. It's difficult to talk about the plan because some of you have been involved since 2017 when we started this. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about, so I'll try to stay at a high enough level to not lose those who are knowledgeable and a low enough level that those who are new to this can follow. So as I said, since the spring of 2017, we've been working with the River Road Community Organization and the Santa Clara Community Organization, the city of Eugene and Lane County to create a neighborhood plan for our two neighborhoods. We have had multiple public events prior to COVID where we've asked our community members, as many as 150 at a time, to come together, tell us what they value in the neighborhood now and what their hopes and visions for the future are, so that we could develop a draft outline of goals, policies, and action items in 5 topic areas to improve our neighborhood hoods: community, economic development, transportation, land use, and parks and natural resources. Out of this, we're working with the city and county to develop a neighborhood plan document, an action plan, a plan and code amendments, and plan designation and zone change tables and maps. That's a big mouthful, but it's how we would implement what we want to see. And the goal, if possible, is to finish that up by the end of 2022. So where are we now? We are currently focused on primary land use and transportation issues along River Road. I don't know how much you know about the joy of traversing River Road as a pedestrian or a bicyclist, or even as a driver of a car, but it's a perfect example of what planners call a scrode, which means it's trying to do 2 things at once. It's trying to be our main street and our way of getting around the neighborhood. And it's also serving as a road for all those people that are trying to get through our neighborhood as fast as possible. And those don't work together well. So we're trying to figure out how to make it function more as a street and less as a road. The good news is that LTD recently recommended, as their moving ahead process, that River Road be the site for a new EMX line, which will bring, if it's done as currently planned, many improvements, such as an EMX line, of course, but also more pedestrian crosswalks, hopefully enhancements of the roadside and beyond on either side. So how do we make that happen in the land use realm as well? The neighborhood plan had developed a corridor study which looked at using the plan stops for the MX line to redesignate the zoning along River Road. And basically what we did is we proposed that anything that's designated as residential right now would be redesignated as corridor residential, which would be multifamily housing. And anything that was a commercial site would be designated as corridor mixed use, which would be a combination of commercial on the ground floor and housing above. We took a quicker look at that, relook at that plan recently and decided that it really didn't quite do what we wanted it to do. It somehow morphed into being more of a sort of a strip mall process rather than a series of strings of pearls along centers on River Road, focused on those stops and more densely develop those so we can create something called a 20-minute neighborhood. And if you don't know that term, that's the ideal is that you in the neighborhood can walk or bike within 20 minutes to the amenities you want, whether they're restaurants, grocery stores, something that we don't have right now. So the CAC, the Community Advisory Committee, which Louisa and I are both on, are going back and re-looking at those and trying to redetermine where those centers should be and what the zoning should look like around those centers. It needs to be done, and we're looking forward to do that. We hope to work with MX to potentially realign their proposed MX stops so they make more sense for the neighborhood, just not every half a mile, which is what they seem to have done before. We also need to figure out what those properties would look like when they were redeveloped, how large they need to be, how we can make them happen. We want to do a market feasibility study to figure out, okay, this is a great idea. Will anybody build it? So that's the effort we're going to have to go through to do some sort of an analysis. If it's not economically feasible, what would it take to make that happen? And get hopefully commitment from the city council to actually develop a plan that won't just sit on a shelf, but will actually result in the kind of community we want to see in the not too distant future. The other thing I would point out is we do have some issues that we have not resolved with the city that I think are important to work through. One of which is, if we're going to have more multifamily housing, how do we deal with parking issues that arose around Echo Apartments? How can we regulate parking in a way that doesn't impact the nearby neighbors, but still works within the city's goal of not having a large amount of parking in those type of developments? Transition standards. If your neighbor or your neighboring building is a one-story commercial business or even a single family home, how do we make, if they're going to be redeveloped as 3, 4, or 5-story buildings, how do we make transitions between the existing single family homes and those new buildings that are compatible with each other to the maximum degree? We also want to make sure that those lands that are commercially zoned and developed now don't end up becoming only multifamily housing. And finally, as Louisa mentioned earlier, we have some concerns about how the Greenway ordinance is currently written. It has no teeth because it's not clear and objective. And we discovered recently that there's no way to raise concerns about a development that might potentially impact the wildlife along the river. So those are things we want to change as well. So sounds like a lot of work. And that's why I'm telling you all about this, because as I said, we hope to finish this by the end of 2022, which includes the City Council and County Commission approving it. So right now, especially if you're interested in getting involved with the corridor study or the Greenway, please sign up with the chat and put neighborhood plan as your interest, your name, your email address, and also pay attention in the near future. We hope to reinvigorate our outreach to everybody in the neighborhoods and get their involvement as we move forward with this planning process. And I actually did it in 8 minutes. Does anyone have any questions? I can't see everybody, but I don't think anybody has their hand up. Well, I hope I didn't bore you to death. It is important, and please stay involved. And as you hear about this, one thing you can do is go online and just type in Eugene Santa Clara neighborhood plan, and that'll take you to the city's website, which will do a much better job than I did explaining all this and how you can get involved.
Lisa has her hand up.
Oh, Lisa.
Louisa.
Oh, Louisa.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks, John. So I guess I just want to chime in that John's absolutely right. We have done literally thousands of hours of outreach, of data gathering, and of aggregation of people's goals and thoughts into what we hope is the cohesive neighborhood plan, and of the particular sticky wickets that John just mentioned. We want those to be opportunities for further conversation and not halting points, or not places that we are holding up progress. So we want to know how to move forward with those things in a collaborative manner with our neighbors, with the city, with landowners, etc. So as we think about the future, as we think about both climate change, autonomous vehicles, better rapid transit and bicycle use, and all of the things that might and will come, how do we put that into code? Because the code changes that John mentioned are the things that are coming sooner rather than later. Sorry, 5-year-old. And so when we get to the city council and we get to planning commission, that's what they're looking at. They're not looking at the big broad picture, the big broad goals, the generic, here's our highest hopes. They're looking at the code changes on paper, and we want those to be right. We want those to be thoughtful. We want those to get to the heart of where the neighborhood wants to be in 10 years, 5 years, 20 years. And so we need everybody's input and backing to get those across the board, so that the rest of it, which a lot of it, I really appreciated the input on the disaster planning, because those are things that are neighborhood led. They're not city led. They're us doing the work. And so when we get to those things, that's what we do. The code changes, the overlay is what gives us the baseline to do that work. And so I hope that people will engage with that and support the direction that we've taken as a neighborhood association and as the community advisory committee. So thank you, John, for your hard work.
And thank you for clarifying that, Louisa. Great. Don't forget to put your name in the chat. So we will move on to the Social Justice Committee, and who's going to speak for you?
I got a question. I have a question for John.
And we're out of time, so please ask a quick one.
Yeah, I would just like to invite people to come to next week's board meeting where we're going to have something of a discussion around the topic, how would widening Beltline to facilitate more traffic affect our neighborhood quality of life? That's next week at the board meeting. And thanks, John.
Thank you, Jan.
Actually, Jolene isn't here yet, so if you wanted to go ahead with the Housing and Land Use Committee next, and we come back to Jolene.
Thank you. I'll try and keep my voice together. I've been sick for the last couple, 3 weeks. First off, the committee hasn't done a lot as a committee, but we have done a few things. Early in the year, there was a proposed microsite at the intersection of Chambers and Northwest Expressway. The city and county asked our committee to do some outreach prior to that site going up, which we did. We had 4 or 5 of us go door to door within a radius to let people know. However, that project has fallen by the wayside due to a couple reasons. First off, funding was not in place, and now we're going through a staff change at the county, and they're trying to bring the new staff member up to speed on that. So that project is kind of on hold. We were successful in getting the proposed safe sleep site on River Avenue. They were looking at 2 sites. They were looking at the former site of the Transit Center, and they were looking at the former site of the North Eugene Foursquare Church, putting in a safe sleep site. But there was a lot of feedback from the neighbors thinking that those types of facilities were too much, on top of the fact that there is the old VA hospital is now a place where the vets that are recovering from COVID have been treated. I don't know if that's still going on or not. I do know that it's being remodeled into what they call a navigation center. A navigation center is where services are provided on site to people who are living on site, be up to 75 beds in that facility. They will have access to addiction mediation, mental health, and the idea is to be able to get the people that are at the upper tier of the unhoused to be prepared to move into their own permanent housing. They'll be getting all their ducks in a row, cleaning up any issues that are in their background, arranging financing for deposits, and attempting to get them into low-income housing. There's quite a bit of low-income housing that is coming online here in Eugene. There's one at 11th and I want to say Charlton, but that's not right. It's where the old mortuary used to be. That one's coming online, and there's a couple other in the works. The site at Chambers and Northwest Expressway, after they decided not to nix the microsite, they were looking at putting 2 pallet shelters, up to 7 units, 400 feet apart on that site. But again, it was prepped and was getting ready to do that when the funding for the pallet shelters fell through. So that's on hold and will be pushed into next year. In the coming year, we want to work our committee, the North Eugene Homeless and Affordable Housing Committee, actually the Unhoused and Affordable Housing Committee, we were just renamed recently to focus on affordable housing issues. We want to work with Santa Clara in the neighborhood plan, trying to determine sites that would be workable for low to middle housing. We will be working with the city and the county in the implementation of House Bill 2001 to determine sites that could be put together that would accommodate middle housing. Also, too, something of I noticed of note going on elsewhere in Eugene that I think would be interesting for us to pursue out here in River Road would be looking at sites for nodes of tiny houses similar to Emerald Village and the new one that just opened up in West Eugene, Everyone Village. Those seem to be a very successful way to get the unhoused off of the streets and into semi-permanent housing. So we want to look to see not only throughout the city but here in River Road what properties might be able to be put together in light and compliance with our neighborhood plan that are being currently worked on. I've recently been appointed to the HRC homeless work group, and as part of my work in that group, I want to emphasize getting the homeless off the streets into more permanent housing, via either pallet shelters or microsites or whatnot. So I'll be working with the city on that, and hopefully we'll be getting the committee more engaged as opportunities present themselves to do outreach into the neighborhood for siting some of these temporary to permanent shelters for the unhoused. We've done a pretty good job. I've been nagging the city quite a bit to keep River Road cleaned up, keep the unhoused from creating communities in and around the interchange with Beltline. I know the Division Street area still needs some work to get that cleaned up. With the opening of the safe sleep sites, they're trying to get the motorhomes and the campers and whatnot off the streets and into those sites. Two have just opened up, one at 4th and Garfield, another one at 4th and Garfield, and they're working on getting another one open at West 11th and Green Hill Road. So that's kind of what's going on in the unhoused and affordable housing arena. If anybody has any ideas or would like to join in our efforts, leave your information in the chat and I'll get back to you.
If I may reiterate, Dwight, we have a big task in front of us this coming year with this committee. We need to develop a good neighbor agreement with the county for their navigation center.
Yep, sorry, I overlooked that. John and I were working with Sarai at the city. We had a fairly good meeting, but so far we haven't seen a lot of results from that. Sarai was going to cobble together a good neighbor agreement, but as of today, I have not seen it. So my plan is to take the ones that John researched and put together in an email and cobble together a template for a good neighbor agreement that we hope to present to the neighborhood in February or March. The navigation site's scheduled to open June 30th. So we
right, and the significant challenge there is that there is no place now for people that are chronically homeless to work their way into the system. And many of those who are chronically homeless is because they are either alcohol or drug dependent. And one of the purposes of this shelter is to help them work through that, which is an important thing that needs to be done, but it might create challenges for our neighborhood in having them as our new neighbors. So the Good Neighbor Agreement will help define the responsibilities of the neighbors, the nearby businesses, this county who's running the program, the provider who's actually working with the individuals and the individuals themselves, so that we know that it'll be as harmonious as possible. So if that's something you want to work with, there's another opportunity we can really use you with to help us, including doing outreach to the nearby businesses. So thank you, Dwight.
To that, John and I think Harry might be in on that.
Yes.
Working with the developers of the River Road apartments to see what we could do to minimize the impact on the Willamette Greenway.
Thank you. Okay, the next group of things we're going to talk, well, we need to go back to social justice. Are we ready, Claire? You're muted, Claire.
Yeah, Ellen is gonna read our report. Thanks.
Okay. So Jolene Simpson put together this report of the activities of our group this past year. And so I'm going to read it in her place. We're a new committee. So we developed a statement of purpose and goals. We created a bias response team, which has guidelines for action, including support for neighbors who think they've been the target of biased behavior. As far as our community outreach, we participated, individual committee members participated in a celebration of the NAACP Mims Garden Project in our neighborhood and assisted as volunteers at the Juneteenth celebration. We sponsored discussions at Reality Kitchen bi-weekly, where committee members would show up and provide the community with an opportunity to meet others and talk about community issues. And our goal was to facilitate civil, mutually respectful conversations. But we discontinued that after the Reality Kitchen closed down its retail activities. We also worked with Centro Latino Americana, and we helped with distributing flyers for vaccine clinics and distributing information about COVID. We communicated with local churches with our statement of purpose, and also to talk with them about local COVID-related resources. At the Emerald Park RRCO annual picnic, we gave out handouts and talked with people about the Social Justice Committee. We also collaborated with Santa Clara organization and Active Bethel regarding the Social Justice Committee and future activities. As I said earlier, our members followed the work of the Ad Hoc Committee on Police Policy, reporting on the published report and suggestions as to how to follow up. We reviewed the recommendations of the Ad Hoc Committee. We drafted and forwarded a letter of support to the RRCO board, which approved that endorsement. Then, initially in coordination with the organization Surge, we completed outreach to most of the City of Eugene neighborhood associations and asked for endorsement of this letter of support. So we actually did meet, I was going to say in person, but in Zoom meetings with 4 or 5 of those neighborhood associations. 5 signed on. I think that counts our group too. And 2 others sent individual letters of support to the City Council. And that's where Jolene is tonight, presenting those letters to the council to be read into the public record. Also in our committee, we're focused a lot on just educating ourselves. We participated in educational trainings, such as the Bystander Upstander workshop, hosted by Surge. And we also went to the Belonging workshop presented by City of Eugene Human Rights and Neighborhood Involvement Team. We've been sharing links to different films, workshops, informative articles, and we've been trying to include those in the monthly RRCO newsletters, including topics related to white supremacy, police policy, reparations, and just the evolution of language, how we talk to each other. We organized a rally along with others when we got an enthusiastic response to a local hate crime. And the rally happened during rush hour along a river road. Many, many neighbors turned out with signs expressing support for love and peace and unity. And the mayor wrote a letter thanking us for this powerful response. So that's a summary of what we've done through the year. Claire, should we segue to the vaccination issue or not yet?
No, we still have more reports to make.
Yeah, that's a separate agenda item. I would
Okay.
just add to that in terms of thinking forward to 2022, we haven't had like a goal setting meeting or anything yet, but we have discussed working towards increasing the diversity of participation in the RRCO meetings.
Yes.
Any questions? Are folks ready to sign up for this committee in the chat? Brenda? No, okay.
Brenda's on the committee already.
It's a fun committee. We're really learning a lot from each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the most valuable things in my experience has been having really thoughtful conversations about the best way to respond to social disturbance in a way that doesn't escalate, you know, and invites people into community. That's been really a growth experience for me. I think we're done.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we now have a sort of a potpourri presentation from committees, for the most part, which haven't been terribly active, but still are important. And that's why we want to make the pitch for those as well. So that's going to be NET committee, the communications committee, the charter review committee. And then Jan, with the time we have left, I'd like you to say something about the Green and Resilient Committee as well. So I'll start off with NET. NET stands for the Neighborhood Enhancement Team. And that group has a focus on preserving the natural vegetation in the West Bank Park and other projects in the neighborhood. In the past, we have been involved with exotic species eradication, mulching the new trees that have been planted along the Greenway, and pruning the Filbert Grove with the direction of Jan. We've installed a kiosk using a neighborhood matching grant along the Greenway and 2 column benches. Most years we have participated in the Great Willamette Cleanup in October with the Willamette River Keepers. And in the past, we've tried to work with Parks and Open Space to initiate both a food forest and a community garden in the area around, come on, John, around the area near the, not the 7-Eleven, but the other.
Maynard Park.
Maynard Park, thank you. But we weren't successful with that because the city told us, well, we want to do a master planning process for that area, and that's likely to happen in the next couple of years. So that's another reason to want to get involved, to help us liaise with Parks and Open Space and help define how we want that large area to be developed. So those are all important things we need to do, especially the keeping the exotic vegetation down. We have not a written agreement, but an informal agreement with this park district that they will not use herbicides in our park if we manually keep things knocked down. So they haven't gotten back to us recently with an area of infestation and threatened us with herbicides, but that may well happen in the future. So those are all reasons why you should want to get involved with NET. And if that's the case, type in NET, your name and your email. We've talked about the Greenway Committee already. Louisa did a great job with that. I just mentioned in passing, we have a communications committee. Our tasks for the next year are going to be actually to publish and mail to every address in the neighborhood 2 snail mail newsletters. We haven't been able to do that in the past because of funding issues, but the county stepped up and helped fund that for us. And we're working on revamping our webpage, improving our social media presence, and trying to look for other ways to reach out to the community, as Claire mentioned before. So if you have expertise and interest in any of those areas, mention communications, your name and your email as well. We have one moribund committee, which is the Charter Review Committee. Those of you who were around this time last year may recall that we did approve a revision of our charter to go to the city council for approval, primarily focusing on converting our current charter into a charter and bylaws, so we don't have to go to the city council to make changes to what is now in our charter. And that process is ready to move forward. All we need is a champion to spearhead that process. So that's the Charter Review Committee, if you'd like to sign up for that. And Jan, the 5 minutes for Green and Resilient, if you'd like to take it.
Yeah, good. Well, it's great to see all the committees. I've been on the board for quite some time, and I think it's safe to say there's more committee and activity work going on than any time I've been involved with RRCO going back 20 years. So, but there's always plenty more to do. So I've been involved a good bit with, could say, kind of greening the neighborhood. The ideal being to produce more basic needs closer to where we live. And this fits in with just about everything we're talking about here. Producing more food, energy, water catchment here in the neighborhood. Historically, we've had lots of site tours in River Road. We had several over the past summer, site tours here in the neighborhood to see what people are doing on their properties. For example, turning grass to garden, edible landscaping. There could be natural building. We even have what I think is a preview of a more green and sociable future. There are actually several places in River Road that are kind of somewhat under the radar micro eco villages with detached small living spaces kind of clustered around a larger house. There are several of those in the neighborhood. This could be a precursor of something that becomes much more mainstream over time. So permaculture is a very important word in this realm of permaculture being a design system for creating human habitats that are more healthy for people and planet. I put an item in the chat earlier on about put a link for a video on YouTube that's a site tour of my particular quarter-acre suburban property here on Horn Lane. I've been transforming my property for ever since I've lived here, and thousands of people have visited over the years. The place is definitely a role model when we talk about all these kind of ideals about quality of life here in River Road. Many of those features are visible already here and there around the neighborhood. There's a number of people in River Road with properties who are being creative with what they have in terms of producing more of their basic needs. So I would invite anybody who's interested to be connected with this kind of activity to put your contact into the chat. We have had Zoom meetings in the past. There's nothing to keep us from having site tours again. We'll have more site tours, work parties to help friends and neighbors turn that grass to garden, different types of workshops. The Filbert Grove was mentioned. This type of green and resilient activity fits in with other of the committee work here as well. The Greenway and preparedness fits in completely with those. So if you would like to give me your contact, then I can keep you posted when we have more activities. When the weather becomes warmer, there's just unlimited potential for having a lot of fun and making River Road a more green and resilient, livable neighborhood, which I think we all want. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jan. Okay, so there's lots of opportunities, folks, and we certainly can use your help. We've really expanded our involvement, which is why these committees are active as they are, but we always need more help. So please think about joining those. Okay, we are at our last item on the agenda, which is a discussion of the Howard Elementary vaccination on November 30th and the resultant protest. The purpose of this item is to discuss the vaccination clinic that took place then, the protests that occurred, and its impact on our neighborhood. This is not a forum to discuss the pros and cons of vaccinations, max mandates, or any other issues not relevant to what specifically occurred at Howard Elementary that day. If the topic veers in that other direction, I will mute you and go to the next person after one warning. So is that understood and acceptable to everyone? As best I can tell, I don't see anybody raising their hand to change it otherwise.
I don't see how we discuss this issue without touching on items that are tangential to that clinic.
Let's hear the report from the Social Justice Committee and let's talk about what they reported. I don't want to make this a forum on vaccinations, Harry. And I would ask for a raising of the hands of those who agree with me right now.
Well, I was told that I would have 3 minutes to rebut the social.
You are going to rebut the report, Harry, and not 3 minutes, but the same amount of time that Jolene takes to make the report, as I told you. We are not going to discuss vaccinations. And the majority of people here agree.
Of course they do, John. The whole point here is that you're silencing the opposition.
Harry, I have spoken. You can make a motion to change that, but right
This is
now
tyranny
that
of the
is
majority. If we were in
Harry,
a room right
do
now,
I
you would not be
silence
able to
you now?
mute me and silence me. Stop it.
Harry, we are not going to discuss vaccinations because that is what the group wants to do. I am sorry you don't agree. Jolene, would you like to make your report, please? Jolene, you are muted.
Thank you. Hi. Hello. Good evening, everybody. All right. I'm Jolene Simpson, and I am speaking on behalf of the Social Justice Committee. What I want to say is the goals of the River Road Community Organization Social Justice Committee encompass a desire to promote peace and goodwill in our community. This is a message that might resonate with all of us even a little more loudly at this time of year. We recognize that we all have different perspectives and strongly held beliefs on many topics and community concerns. We support robust information sharing and debate in appropriate settings with mutually agreed upon rules of civility and good behavior. That is, words and actions that are non-threatening and respectful. We are reporting that recently Lane County Public Health held a pediatric COVID vaccine clinic for children ages 5 to 12 at Howard Elementary School. Approximately 150 parents came with their children in order to receive this vaccine. Others, perhaps 40 to 50, went to the school site in order to protest the clinic and the COVID vaccine. Nearby neighbors complained that the demonstrators were so loud that they could hear the shouting, sometimes through a bullhorn, despite the fact that doors and windows were closed. 2 of the demonstrators, not from our neighborhood, but from Roseburg, were cited for trespassing on school grounds. There were reports from Lane County Public Health, Eugene Police, and parents that demonstrators, in addition to shouting, were walking slowly back and forth on the sidewalk in front of cars that were entering and exiting the school grounds, shoving flyers at windows and shouting things like vaccines are dangerous and you're murdering your children. This was done while young children were in the cars with their parents and were either anticipating a shot or had already received the vaccine. An RRCO board member, Harry Sanger, spoke during public comment to the Lane County Commissioners meeting, announcing the protest at the school and encouraging people to participate. He said that any conflict that developed would be the fault of the sheriff trying to keep the demonstrators away from the parents. And he specifically called for the sheriff to stand down and allow the protesters access to families, parents, and young children at the school. And I have a link to that video. Due to the conflict at these school-based clinics, 4J has decided not to host any further COVID vaccine clinics, removing a convenient, easily accessed neighborhood site for this important medical care. The RRCO Social Justice Committee discussed similar circumstances reported at a different vaccine clinic and even considered showing up at Howard Elementary School, demonstrating positively with balloons, songs, and safe accompaniment to counter the negativity. Ultimately, we did not want to escalate an already tense situation, being especially mindful that this was a vaccine clinic for young children. At the most recent Social Justice Committee meeting, we discussed the outcome of the Howard Elementary School vaccine clinic, including reports from Public Health, Eugene Police Department, parents, and neighbors, which reflected illegal actions, harassment, lack of civility, and intimidation on the part of demonstrators. 5 members of the Social Justice Committee voted in support of a motion to the board asking for review, discussion, and possible discipline of the actions of board member Harry Sanger due to his involvement in recruiting for this demonstration, and particularly due to his statements essentially inviting conflict if law enforcement were called on to do their job, keep the peace, and protect school property. No one is challenging the right to free speech. If individuals are unhappy with vaccine requirements or the establishment of vaccine clinics, peaceful protests at administrative offices might be more appropriate. Loud, bullying, and intimidating behavior at a school-based health clinic for young children is reprehensible. The type of behavior has no place in our neighborhood, and an invitation to this type of demonstration is not an example of the kind of leadership needed by our neighborhood. That's all I have.
Thank you, Jolene. Harry, that was 4 minutes and 30 seconds. You can have the same amount of time, but we are not going to discuss political beliefs. We're going to talk about what happened that day. You understand?
I understand that I have 4 minutes and 30 seconds to rebut what was just said.
As long as you stick to the particulars that were mentioned, yes.
Okay, John, if you choose to censor me in this forum, that's on you. I'm going to present the information that I believe our neighbors need to make an educated evaluation of this situation.
Harry, are you going to talk about the event, or are you going to talk about your political beliefs?
John, I believe that you're out of line, and I call for you to step down from your overbearing leading of this meeting right now and allow me the time that you told me I would have to speak.
If you want to make a motion to change my ruling, please do so, and we'll see whether the group agrees.
So that I can be defeated by, I'm just going to talk. If you want to mute me, John. I haven't even said anything, John. I'm going to file a formal complaint against you for what you're doing. We will talk about it in our board meeting if you keep this up.
Okay, go ahead. And
all of our neighbors deserve equal treatment under the law. No matter how much you disagree with the beliefs of your neighbor, discriminating against them based on that belief is literally un-American. As long as they are following the law, they deserve equal treatment under said law. Sometimes laws aren't perfect, and as we saw last summer, it can be acceptable to peacefully protest and highlight unjust laws. The current mask mandate isn't even a law, it is an executive diktat.
Okay, Harry, I'm sorry, you did not follow the rules. At any point in time, you can make a motion.
John, I have a prepared statement that addresses.
Please let Harry talk.
Please let
Harry talk.
Okay, Harry, I'll give you your 4 minutes, but after that, we will not discuss anything other than what happened in the event.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Dan. The American system of government is founded on the separation of powers and checks and balances. The legislative branch writes the law, the judicial branch interprets the law, and the executive branch administers the law. When the executive seizes control of both creating de facto laws via mandates and the enforcement, society becomes imbalanced. Nowhere is this imbalance more evident in modern America than right here in Oregon. Our culture, mainstream media, alternative media like the Eugene Weekly, and social media are all currently marching in lockstep about a fear-driven pandemic narrative, ignoring glaring violations of cultural norms up to and including testing an unapproved emergency use genetically based treatment on 5 to 11-year-old children. Personal choice is important, and if this was only about whether parents take their children to a pediatric doctor for advice and a potential shot, the community would have more understanding. Nobody is calling for a ban on wearing masks or distributing the vaccine. The vaccine makes sense when discussing the risk of the elderly or infirm. But for many younger members of our community, the statistical risk of serious infection is at or near zero. When our government openly promotes a practically untested experiment on some of the youngest and least able to consent members of our society, our system appears broken. Efforts were made to establish dialogue with the Lane County Board of County Commissioners, our own Commissioner Pat Farr, and the 4J School Board prior to this event. When officials won't meet their constituents and hear them out, our system appears broken. Equal rights are essential to our democracy, and when certain groups are identified as deserving of rights and others are not, that is discrimination. There are a number of reasons your neighbors oppose mandatory masking and vaccines to fully participate in society. These include lack of trust in the government, medical privacy, philosophical or religious beliefs, and the basic defense of civil rights. Do you support discrimination and oppression of these individuals in our community? And to address some of the things that were stated, neighbors did come out, and some of our neighbors joined in the protest because they are also opposed to what's going on in our community right now and in our society. Those neighbors joining this movement because they are not being represented by anybody else here that's trying to stifle my voice and stifle this discussion. It was suggested that protesters go to district offices or administrative offices and protest. The Lane County Board of Commissioners is not meeting in person right now. And when protesters did show up to the 4J board meeting, they shut down the meeting and took it online. They have been online ever since.
Right, complete your statement, Harry.
Thank you, John.
Okay. So if you would like to discuss this item, and again, the issue is what happened that day, please put your name in the chat and I will call on you. And depending on how many people we have, we'll determine how much time we have. So please put your name in the chat if you'd like to speak. Ann Mahoney.
Yes, hi. I would just like to say that I was not at the protest, but I support Harry's actions. I fully understand the reasons why it was necessary for Harry and other neighbors to go there and make their voices heard, because it's almost impossible, as he described, to do it in any other venue in the current situation that we're in. So I'm very, very disappointed in you, John, to try to shut down Harry's right to free speech and to censor him and to exhibit this extraordinary amount of control during this meeting, when all of us are just trying to make our views heard, and we are finding ourselves being censored in every single venue. And I don't think that this is a good example of allowing free speech. So I really appreciate, thank you. I really appreciate Harry's efforts to speak up and to make these views known, given that we have very few other ways to do it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ann. Dan, stay so a minute.
Thanks, John, for offering me this time. I am a major supporter of free speech, and we all have our own particular viewpoints about, based on our own moral standards and moral perspectives about what's right and wrong. And I support Harry's right to speak and to speak his mind. I don't know the history of this organization, and I'm sure there's a backstory of all this, but I don't know exactly what happened at that school. I think that maybe it's easy to misinterpret that there was a ruckus going on. I know some people have strong opinions about it, but again, I'm really in favor of respecting other people's opinions.
20 seconds.
And the freedom of speech, basically. I think people have strong opinions about it. And that's basically all I have to say.
Thank you. Ellen Rifkin.
There's ways to express one's opinion that are more respectful of young children, and that particular event than getting in people's faces and intimidating people. The flyers could have been brought and left somewhere where people could have accessed them if they wished to. There could have been other ways to make opinions known without bullying and intimidation.
Thank you. Alex Elkin.
May I please respond directly to that comment?
Put your hand, put yourself in the queue, Harry.
Well, John, I'm a panelist here, and Ellen made a statement that I can respond to and give more information before we continue.
Okay, you have a minute.
I don't, so thank you. So Ellen, there were flyers, and that is what I was asking for Jay and the county to allow us to stand near the entrance and peacefully give those to people without yelling and screaming and shouting. My comments about conflict being created were in regards to that. If protesters are pushed to the street and the only way to communicate is by yelling, people are going to yell. If they could have stood and handed flyers and talked to people, or like you said, left the stack of flyers there. I presented flyers to them and they were unwilling to discuss that. So thank you though for your suggestions. I appreciate it. And I see a lot of parallels with what the Social Justice Committee does and what happened here. And so I appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Let's see. Alex Elkin.
Hi. Yeah, I was not at the protest. However, I did watch videos, and the whole idea of shutting down speech is abhorrent to me. And the only way we're going to be heard is if we do raise our voices, because I was at one of the 4J meetings. I was signed up to speak and they denied me entrance, and not because I wouldn't follow any of their arbitrary rules. It was the fact that they made an arbitrary rule and decided to change it last minute. This has been going on and ad nauseum. Throughout our committees and our boards here in the city. What Harry and the group did going out there was completely justified. And if it were another side of the group, if you look at Portland, where you have groups out there destroying property and just absolutely being unruly, I think what happened at Howard Elementary is completely acceptable, and shutting his speech down is unacceptable in my opinion.
Thank you, sir. Claire Strawn.
I think that we're talking more than the right of individuals to speak their mind about their personal beliefs. We're talking about access to public health care. And the fact that they had to close the clinic just scares me, because I see the things that are happening around abortion and protests against abortion that are intimidating and bullying. I see pushing kids around, and people who want to protect their kids have a right to do that without interference from people who disagree with their right to protect their kids. And so I am offended by these actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Julie Hume.
Thank you. I was not at the protest either, but I would like to state my very, very strong support for free speech. However, I believe that with the right of free speech comes a great deal of responsibility, and that responsibility includes not intimidating, not using fear, and allowing people access to information so that they can make choices as well as having access. And I fear that some of the intimidation and the forcefulness in which opinions are being brought forth at some of these demonstrations are shutting down some of our vulnerable populations. In this case, I believe it was children, and instilling them with a sense of fear, as well as the parents, leaving them to deal with that fear with their children, and then stopping clinics elsewhere. That is a great concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Please try to stick to a minute. Brenda Willis.
Wills, not Willis.
Oh,
I probably spelled it wrong.
No, it's me.
I'm a retired clergy person, and so I respect the right to free speech. And I think what most concerned me about what happened at Howard Elementary School is that parents who had made decisions to have their children vaccinated experienced bullying and intimidation, and their children were with them. It wasn't like the children could be not there when the parents were there, and that's interfering with those parents' decision to parent 9 and 8 and 7 and 6-year-olds. That's an adult discussion about whether someone believes.
Brenda, could you finish up, please?
Sure. Anyway, I just am concerned about the children and think the behavior there was wrong.
Okay, does anyone wish to speak to this issue that hasn't already, or if they have? Okay, I don't see anybody in the chat. I guess that concludes our discussion. There's a request from the Social Justice Committee to discuss this in the next board meeting, and we will do so and report back to you. Thank you, everybody. We are completed.
John, can you save the chat, please? I can't